Hi, and welcome to Deep Dive with Jamie Stein, where we take a deep dive look at all things reality TV, pop culture, and the world at large. I'm an intuitive and an empath, which means I pick up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy percolating in other people and the world around me. I believe there is meaning waiting to be found at every turn if you're willing to see it. So join me as we dismantle everything from trash TV to high spiritual concepts and learn more about ourselves, each other, and how we're all connected. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive with Jamie Stein. I am actually really excited about today's episode. The Deep Dive Detective Agency is on the case. It's on the case of Whitney Rose and the Alibaba necklace. We are here to finish what we started a few weeks ago. We stumbled into an impromptu part one exploration of Whitney Rose. We laid some of the psycho-spiritual groundwork, tapped into some of the energy, and now we're here to complete the journey. And I actually feel like this timing has worked out perfectly because we did open the door, and now since then, there's been this whole storyline that's playing out on the show connected to Whitney Rose and her business, her businesses, and all the controversy around that. So it just feels like perfect fodder for us to get deeper into the mystery, the myth, the legend of Whitney Rose. So to join me on this journey, of course, I'm bringing back my guest from part one. She's becoming quite a regular visitor to the deep dive to the benefit of us all. Please welcome back vocal coach, tarot enthusiast, astrology enthusiast, Bravo enthusiast, Molly Durand. Hi, Molly.
Hello, hello.
How are you today?
Well, listen, we had a Scorpio new moon, and I'm a double Scorpio, and we're the detectives of the zodiac. Pluto is all about, it's the planet that has this mysterious blue aura around it that scientists can't quite explain. So it's a good time to uncover and discover and discard all of the illusions. I always think of scorpionic energy as the death and rebirth transformation, but also seeing like Plutonian, like seeing what's unseen and calling it out. So really bringing out the subconscious, but also like really not judging it, but just seeing it, letting it come up so it can be transmuted.
Well, and I do think it's interesting. We're recording this the day before daylight savings. So we're about to be plunged into darkness. So you could look at that as a metaphor of being plunged into shadow material.
My favorite.
All right. I'm ready to dive right in. So, oh God, you guys, there is so much here. So before we even start, I'm just going to really start by slowing this down. And I really want to start dismantling this piece by piece because there's the on-camera drama and then there's a whole other world of what's going on in Whitney's business life with this, what we might call parent company. This primary business endeavor she's got going on called Soul People, which to all appearances seems to be a major MLM. I'm sure we'll get into that. But let's start with what's on screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just really going to walk people through what's going on the show. Obviously, the show is addressing it, but I know not everyone kind of follows all of this, as closely as some do not follow all this as closely as others. You guys, when I tell you, the reason why I'm calling this the Deep Dive Detective Agency, I did so much research yesterday. I was on YouTube. I was researching MLMs. I was researching Soul People, Alibaba, Prism, just everything. And I feel so clear right now. So with that said, I'm just going to kind of start breaking down what we're seeing. And then we can use that as the doorway for entering into this material. So are you ready to go, Molly?
Absolutely.
Okay. So let me just look at my notes. Again, there's so much here. I get a little overwhelmed. So as we know, basically where this all begins is that Whitney Rose has a jewelry line called Prism, ostensibly a spiritual jewelry line. If you go to her website, she positions this. Actually, I have her website even up right now. Maybe I'll just even read this verbatim. Oh, you know what? I accidentally I accidentally quit it. So I don't have it up right now, but you can go and read it. The gist of it, though, is she talks about, literally says this is like intentionally curated, ethically sourced, literally says ethically sourced jewelry that is specifically meant to help women on their spiritual journeys, to help them stay aligned to their spiritual journeys, to help them step into the power of manifestation. I mean, this is overtly and explicitly positioned as a spiritual jewelry line, right? So she's got this jewelry line, Prism, and she debuted this last season on the show. Now, the controversy that initially broke out is while they were filming the show, there was this content creator named Dana Wilkie, who most of you are going to remember from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I think it was the second season. She was a friend of that season. She's the one who has the now notorious line like, oh, do you like my sunglasses? $25,000. So she is now a content creator. She reports on all things Bravo. So she breaks the story that basically on Whitney Rose's website at the time, she's basically selling jewelry from Alibaba, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's just basically like a Chinese bulk goods center where you can buy cheaply made items in bulk and resell them. And it's clear, allegedly, that Whitney Rose is basically reselling Alibaba jewelry because she literally, or she or her team or whomever, literally just repurposed the exact photos from the Alibaba website of the product onto her website, which, we could get into that really not being the smartest move and what that perhaps says about Whitney, that she didn't even take the time to take her own professional photos. Just so people know, I'm going to actually, I think, link to this person's YouTube video because I found it so fascinating. I found this half-hour video of a woman who is actually used to work as a drop shipper. And she actually used to be really involved with Alibaba and AliExpress, and she's a Real Housewives fan. And she just broke the whole thing. She did her own deep dive into Prism jewelry, and she broke the whole thing down. It's fascinating. I'll link it in my show notes because I want to give her proper credit. I think her account name was Maggie_TV, MAGGY_TV. But one of the things she mentioned in her deep dive is when you are someone who does something like this, where if you're someone who, for example, buys things in bulk from Alibaba and then sort of resells it, one of the first things people tell you to do is shoot your own photos of it, because what people can do, which is what happened in this case, is they can very easily reverse image Google search and it will just lead it right back to Alibaba. So this story breaks that Whitney is essentially just reselling and upselling Alibaba Chinese jewelry as her Prism jewelry. Now, why does this matter? Let's get into that. Because technically, and Whitney, even in her deflection, she made this sort of vague general point on the show of this is commerce. This is what almost everyone does, right? You buy it from a provider or a supplier for a certain price, and then you resell it for a higher price to customers, right? So that is commerce. There's nothing inherently certainly nothing illegal about it. There's nothing even necessarily immoral about it. The issue comes in. So, okay, there's a couple issues with it. So the first issue is the markup in this case is incredibly high. So Whitney is essentially buying something that literally costs the equivalent of $2.50 and then reselling it for $50 on our website, right? So essentially someone who's buying it through the Whitney Rose Prism website is paying $50 for something that they could just as easily go to AliExpress and buy it for $2.50. Now, again, it's sort of scummy, but it's not necessarily overtly shady. But where the issue really comes in is the way that Whitney is positioning this on her website, right? Well, first of all, really using her fame, obviously, as a way to sort of leverage the brand, leverage the business, as they all do. But then again, that she's basically taking this mass-produced jewelry from China that is in no way intentionally curated, no way ethically sourced, in no way, designed with any sort of spiritual intention in mind. And then she's literally saying on the site, this is jewelry for your spiritual mission. Like I said, ethically sourced, intentionally curated. Again, I'm sure we'll get into this. Even on the show, when this comes up, she keeps saying it's curated from vendors. And she never really gets more specific than that. But she leads with this cover story or this illusion that there's this deep intentionality behind the pieces. So in that sense, you really could say there's a deception here. She's selling an illusion. I mean, you were talking about piercing the illusion. She's selling an illusion that's not really true. She's using her fame to leverage it. And then she's just sort of grabbing the money. So there's a lot we could say even about that right there. What I'm most just immediately drawn to before we even get into like the storyline of it all, of her accusing Lisa of being the one to plant the story and this, that, and the other. I just think it's fascinating from the outset that Whitney has chosen to marry what is essentially just a tacky e-commerce business, which again, a lot of celebrities do this. A lot of influencers do this. It's an easy cash grab. It's an easy buck to make. It's like, I'm just putting my face on this and I'm reselling it. What is so fascinating to me about it, though, is her decision to marry this to a spiritual lens. And in a way to really, I mean, I know not everyone buys into it, but in a way, the brand, so to speak, that she's developed on the show is her spiritual journey. It is her healing journey. And that she's really leveraging that to be the vehicle and the vessel for this tacky e-commerce business. And that, like I said, right there fascinates me because there's this immediate symbiotic relationship between essentially a scam she's running and her spiritual journey. And just both the decision to do that, the ethics of that, what that maybe reflects or reveals about her own relationship to her spiritual journey, what this maybe says to us about the way she's wielded her spiritual and healing journey on the show. And by the way, this is all connected also to the alleged MLM that she's also running that's not even on the show, because this also fits that bill very much. But let me just stop there and just check in with you, Molly. Like before, again, we even get into the story dynamics of the show, where are you at in terms of Whitney Rose's, her decision as an entrepreneur to essentially commodify her spiritual journey and attach her spiritual journey to an e-commerce cheap racket?
Yeah, it's the oldest trick in the book, right? So when we think about right now, Catholicism was essentially built for the royals in order to gain power, right? And a lot of religions were built in order to support the political power. In fact, Trump has used the evangelical movement as a method to gain the power that he's looking, because there's a vulnerability upon people when it comes to beliefs in the unknown, that people feel more comfortable in community, which I 110% understand. And Whitney comes from a Mormon background, so it doesn't surprise me that her newfound spirituality, which of course I believe that a part of her is seeking, is something that she's tapping into in order to be able to then make sense of it all for herself. But when I pulled cards for her before we started, I got the Page of Swords, which is literally perfection. And that's why I love the tarot, because it just cuts right through to the simplicity of the archetype. And the Page of Swords is somebody the swords represent the mind, they represent air, so communication. She's a Libra, very intelligent in my opinion, but also because of the trauma that I do believe she has, she's not able to use her intelligence in a way where she feels secure. And when somebody's not secure, but they have motives of wanting prestige and power, they can become a little bit dangerous. And when they grow up in a society where the church the faith was used as a way for certain people to gain power, they're going to essentially want to get that power for themselves at some point. So to use spirituality as a tool to then commodify seems like it is the big lie. And she says, I'm not a liar. And Justin says she's not a liar. And it's the big lie. There are 3 words on her website. I couldn't go past much on her website without just getting the ick. So I didn't go too deep. But the 3 words were intentional, spiritual, luxury. Oh, that's interesting. Luxury, spiritual, intentional, and then Alibaba, right? Those things don't go hand in hand, right? And neither do a lot of things that are happening. I feel like this is, and this is why you do your podcast and the work that you do, is that this particular topic that we're talking about is literally playing on the world stage, both politically and otherwise, like in our lives. Like this is a huge tool that has been used since the beginning of time to utilize spirituality, whether it be religion or whatever is popular at the time, and use it to pull in power. Right now, it's popular to have crystals. I mean, look at us, right? It's like, I'm a mystic, it's popular, right? Even though it's ancient. And I also hold all of it with a grain of salt and an open mind of not like needing to be an expert in any way, shape, or form. But this to me kind of makes sense. And when you were talking about the Page of Swords is almost like a copycat, is definitely somebody who's watching everybody. They're a page. They're not even a knight. They haven't ascended into kingdom. They are starting the journey. And usually it's like when you're first learning music, you cover other songs in order to learn how to sing. You cover other songs to learn how to play. And then eventually you start to write your own. And she hasn't written her own, which is why people like Meredith with the bath, that's Meredith's bath thing is like original to Meredith. So of course she's going to copy and paste that. And people like Heather writing about leaving the Mormon church is going to trigger her because she left the Mormon church, but she didn't write a book, So, and that's why she's been after Lisa's business since episode 1. This is something that deeply triggers her because I think because something was taken from her as a child, she doesn't trust in herself and the ability to create. So she feels like she's the Page of Swords. She has to watch everybody else do it and copy and paste. The Page of Swords is literally somebody who's like spying on the internet, seeing what's popular, and then copying and pasting it. The Page of Swords can go a lot. There's also a lot of good traits to it too, because it's the beginning of learning how to utilize your mind for like using the divine mind rather than the manipulative mind. And I think she has a brilliant mind that I wish she would use for goodness, but she also, just like Heather, refuses to have introspection. My issue with her and Heather is that they are always looking outward. So that I think comes from their Mormon upbringing. So I think that they were not taught how to have introspection, but right now, the markup that she's doing for the commerce is also just showing this sort of empty vessel, right? That she can't self-create. So I'm going to mark it up, which is also happening on the global scale, that where people are sort of pointing at the political and e-commerce movement that's going on in the world with inflation. And she's actually a part of that, but then claiming to be this victim who's overcoming being victimized. And yet she's becoming the actual thief, right? So I think the word thief and the Page of Swords are sort of, why would somebody steal? Because they're desperate and they don't feel that they can self-create.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that you said, and now there's so much coming through me. One thing I'll just say, because I love bringing in the historical context and the greater context and the transpersonal context. Yeah, I just was really sitting with what you brought in about just like the legacy and the history of the way in which spiritual truth and mysticism immediately gets co-opted for profit and for gain. And it reminds me a lot of when we were last talking about She Who Shall Not Be Named and that notion of temptation, right? Because, for those of us who do walk a spiritualist path, for those of us who do believe in mysticism, those of us who do believe in the kingdom of, and I know this word can be triggering for people. So however, whatever your language is for higher power, higher intelligence, but the kingdom of God, for those of us who truly believe in that, it is the most abundant, sustaining, and sustainable place. And it offers, it offers potentiality. It offers the potential of everything. Suddenly, it's interesting to experience it this way. I'm suddenly experiencing spiritual truth and invitation and mysticism as the ring in Lord of the Rings. It's this shiny object that offers you so much, right? But then with our human will and our human ego and our human frailty, what happens when there's a shiny object in front of us? There's that temptation to grab its riches. I mean, this is what's going on in the world today. I talked about this, and I think this is very connected to what you're saying. We're finding ourselves butting up against the limitations of the systems and the structures that we've created, because many of the systems and the structures that we've created are based upon squeezing things dry and getting as much out of the resource as we can as quickly as possible before it runs out, which, by the way, that's totally the energy of MLM. Like, we'll get into MLMs, but it's like, let me make as much money as fast as possible because this is going nowhere. Someone's losing. It's a total scarcity mindset, which you were just speaking to. So I just sort of love bringing in just this legacy again of how spirituality gets grabbed, perverted, and distorted. And it really is a tragedy too, because I'll work with people, for example, who maybe have Christian backgrounds. And a lot of times I can feel for them. I can kind of feel on an intuitive level, it feels like there's actually something that really wants to come through for you around your connection to like Christian mysticism and the roots of Christianity. And so many people are so hesitant to go there because, as we know, there's so many aspects and facets of the church that have taken the core roots, which, and I don't want to get too lost in the weeds, but, there is a very prevalent school of thought that believes that Christ was actually a mystic who was in the mystery schools and embodied mysticism, but this was taken and commodified and wielded a lot of times in a very destructive way. It's just, I don't know, I'm just suddenly so fascinated about that notion of taking something that has so much boundless potentiality. Like literally the thing that should be the most sacred becomes the tool of, and it makes so much sense because if we look at spirituality as on a certain fundamental level, the union of opposites, and the dissolution of opposites and polarity and the oneness of everything. Well, of course, the darkest darkness is going to go towards the lightest light. Of course, that's what's going to happen. So I'll say that. But coming back to Whitney, again, you said so much. It is interesting because as an aside, I tried all week to start dropping into Whitney and to do drop-ins. And I had initially an experience not totally dissimilar to She Who Shall Not Be Named, where the second I would drop into her, I would just start to feel really dizzy. It was almost like I was in one of those funhouse distorted mirror houses where I couldn't see straight and I'd get dizzy and then it's like I'd fall over. And so I was like, okay. I mean, and to me, yeah, did that feel like information about what I've previously referred to as Whitney's possible kind of fragmented psyche? Yes. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm just not going to get a lot of clarity here. And so I sort of left it at that. Now, for whatever reason, I was rewatching some of the episodes this morning to prepare for this episode, and something in me was like, just try dropping in now. And I did. And I actually started to get some clearer hits. So I don't know what that's about. But when I dropped into Whitney I know we haven't gotten there yet. I think I was dropping into her towards the MLM or even just like sort of this business. And because I am so curious about, and you're bringing this question in, it's like, if you're going to be spending all this time, energy, and money to create these MLMs, which really, I mean, it is basic. It is a business. It's a shady business, but it's a business. And people are running it like a business. And I'm just sitting there from my seat, just like, you're already investing all this time, energy, and money into this. Why don't you invest that same time and energy and money into something viable that's of service, that has integrity? It makes zero sense to me. But I was just dropping into Whitney towards these schemes and these scams. And, why aren't you just creating? Why don't you go out and create the thing that you say you're creating? Why don't you go source actual custom jewelry from curated vendors and bless it? You know what I mean? And create actual spiritual journey. Like, why don't you actually do this? And so when I dropped into her, it really was this feeling of, like scarcity and fear. It was this voice that said, I got to grab as much money as I can as soon as possible because there's not enough for everyone. I've got to get mine now. This sort of like rush to get there before, kind of like what you're saying, before it's taken from me, before someone else gets it. And then when I kind of felt even deeper into that thread, it was this feeling of like, I have to prove myself now. Because again, I started to drop into, well, what if I oriented as Whitney towards slowing down, creating a legitimate business, doing my research, doing my due diligence. And it was this kind of, what really came through for me, and I think this really relates to what you were saying. First of all, there was this panic of, if I undertake something in an actually intentional and serious way, I could fail. And if I fail, it's going to, like, this was the voice I heard, it's going to prove all of them right. they're going to be laughing at me. I won't get the last word. And so that's why I say when I orient back towards these sort of scammy businesses, it's I'm in a rush to prove something. I get the last laugh. I'll show you. So obviously we don't know a ton about her history, but it definitely felt to me like a flavor of, kind of what you're talking about. Like if obviously somewhere, if we go with what we're exploring in this episode, she internalized some message that she doesn't have the goods. Right? That's what you're saying. So that comes from somewhere. So for me, it's sort of like, you have this driving voice in her to say, no, I do have what it takes. I do have the goods. I'm going to show you. I'm going to prove it. And the way I'm proving it is I'm going to fucking get the money now. And again, there's that sort of scarcity mentality of like, if it doesn't happen now, I might lose out. And then I'm the laughing stock again. And I'm playing to win. So I got to win as soon as possible, however possible. And I'm grabbing that money where I can. And this is what I'm doing.
Wow. There's so much that you said, particularly when you said she's in a rush to prove. Being in a rush is like the most, for me in my life, has been the most destructive thing. Like craft takes time, right? That's something that an astrologer told me, and it changed my whole life. But when you were speaking, what came to me was something that I've said before, which is those who hate can't create. And I feel there's a lot of hatred coming from Whitney towards the other women when they're They're succeeding because there's a feeling that she can't create, like we're talking about, like this empty vessel. There's no self-trust. Page of Swords. I'm just watching everybody else, but I don't know. I haven't taken the time to slow down. I haven't actually done the healing. If, she's probably started the healing process, but that takes years. And like for me, when I see Whitney, like for her to really like flower and flourish, I literally see her as like not like embracing her sexuality and doing like actual like spiritual sex healing. Like that's something that I think would be really powerful for her. And also like diving into, her shadow, but like integrating it in a way where she's being honest with herself rather than honest about truth telling about everybody else around her. It's always about the external for her. It's never inward. And it reminds me of how going back to this idea of using spirituality as a tool for commerce, it's also for power and prestige. What is the evangelical movement says that evangelical says that I'm Christ on a cross, I'm being crucified, and therefore and that's how Trump uses it, and he slanders everybody else. And she is slandering everybody's business and slandering everybody's credibility in order to try and position herself in a way to be more credible. But she often says, I always think of when I think of Whitney, I think you spot it, you got it. Whatever she says about other people, and we said this in the last podcast, but whatever she projects out, and you've talked about projection with her too, like whatever she says other people are doing is what she is doing. Lisa has also said that. And I think that's like probably it could be coming from like an infantile ego where she actually isn't self-aware enough to know that she's doing it, but it's occurring in her. She's seeing it in others. And usually sometimes the mirror, when we see it in others, we then next see it in ourselves. I know that I have projected in my life. And when I've seen it outward, it's agitated me and triggered me. And I've gotten mad at that person because I haven't healed it in myself. And yes, Jesus was a great metaphysician. He turned water into wine, for Christ's sakes, right? So it's like, come on, Jesus was a witch. But when I go back to also this idea of slander, and if you don't feel that you can create, you actually start to generate hate of those who can. And this idea of what you said was scarcity, I really was drawn to, because if it's almost like Whitney feels like if they have it, like if Lisa or this or that, if they have it, then there won't be enough for me. And I feel like Heather's in that place too, but Heather actually usually takes it as her value and worth. Like, you think you're better than me. She's always saying stuff like that. So it's this idea of not having enough, not being okay standing on my own 2 feet. I, as myself, cannot be the divine feminine and create from within, right? I'm not the Empress card. I'm not, Mother Mary who birthed a child out of nothing, right? And so it's like, literally, she could be if she tapped into it, but since she's choosing not to because she hasn't been taught how to, what she's doing is what I think a lot of racists do in this country. Tucker Carlson literally got on stage and talked about Malaysians and Samoans and said they have a low IQ, and the crowd cheered. And the reason that he's doing this is because his arrogance is born, and this is how I feel about Whitney a little bit, like these types of arrogance and fear that you're not going to be okay unless you slander everybody else comes from this inferiority, right? If I'm acting superior, it's because I feel inferior. And when I feel inferior, it's because I've pretty much been handed most things in my life. And I don't even know, I don't have any life experience to know that if I wasn't given these privileges, would I be okay? This is literally happening on the world stage. We have, like, Lisa has to account for everything and show proof of everything. Like, I'm sorry, Kamala has to overproduce proof of everything while Trump can do whatever he wants and gets away with it. This double standard has been called out by the whole world right now. And it seems like themes pop up and then the whole world responds to them, the collective conscious. And I feel like this storyline plays right into that. It's like Whitney has every possibility and every advantage given to a person. She really, truly does. So the question of why she would go to like the lowest bottom feeder is a really good question, because it doesn't matter what you have externally. If internally you feel that there's no seed to grow from, then you are going to become desperate and reach out to these externals that, like you said, won't provide much of anything.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I am so aware just to hold the place, and I think you just brought this in as well, of Whitney's possible, what we might call her higher self, her more integrated aspects. Much like with She Who Shall Not Be Named, like, it is interesting to me that we are bringing in these really deep historical themes and even larger global themes that reflect the topic at hand. And to me, I just have to imagine that on some level, like, this is a reflection of Whitney in her field. And what just sort of came to me, I just sort of heard the words, like, she is someone who actually might really be, this would actually account for a lot in terms of how she presents, that she might be a channel, that she is someone who, and I'm experiencing her potentially as like a really wide open channel, like, again, in her higher self, a clean, clear channel who's really able, I'm aware I'm using language that not everyone listening might understand what I mean when I say a channel. How would you I mean, I'm a channel. It's like when I say channel, and you might have a simple way of explaining this, meaning that she's like a channel of information, that she's someone who can access larger transpersonal themes, that access the globe. She's someone who can access things that come from history. Maybe she can access divine wisdom, that she is someone potentially who maybe can be a vehicle and a vessel for information that wants to come through her that's bigger and larger than just her personality, that can be of service. In its ideal state, that can be of service for others. And I think the reason why that makes sense to me is because, kind of like what we're talking about, there is a way that Whitney often feels like she doesn't have a true identity of her own.
Yes.
Like, it feels like that almost is kind of like the inversion of what you're talking about, right? Someone who doesn't have a developed interior life. Well, I could see the evolved version of that of, well, my inside is this wide open column that can be a vehicle and a vessel for like larger information that wants to come through, that connects all the dots, which would also make sense with her because, as we've established, there is an emotional intelligence to her and there is a perception to her. So I could see her being someone who can access deeper levels of information and then start connecting dots of everything that she's seeing. People make a lot of fun of the halted way that she talks. And it's almost like what's coming to me, she has this very slow way of speaking, which sometimes feels unconsciously passive aggressive. Like, I know she likes to kind of unconsciously poke at people. And sometimes the way that she talks and her cadence feels like a vehicle for that. But what's also coming to me now too is she also just might be processing things differently than people. And there might be something going on with her, like literally on a cognitive level, where she processes things differently, but that also could be potentially the foundation and basis of her gifts, So I don't know, this is just all coming to me in the moment. I didn't plan on saying any of this. But what I wanted to also say is, I'm so drawn to the scarcity. And I just want to return to this kind of dropping into Whitney in relationship to, if I were to try to create from a place of intention and integrity, because there were a few things that came through me when I dropped into this before, and I just want to revisit them. So I'm literally going to drop in right now and so I do want to say again, I do immediately feel what I mentioned before, which was just, oh shit, if I try and then fail, that's the most humiliating and embarrassing thing. And then that proves everyone right about me. And I feel the rage. I will not fucking tolerate that. I will not give them that rope to hang me. I won't do it. I won't do it. I won't do it. So I hear that. But then if I stay with this, because I feel like this is connected to what you were saying, there's so much coming through. One, I feel really lost.
Mm-hmm.
There's something here around, in this place, I have to humble myself enough to know what I don't know and ask for help. Something about asking for help feels really dangerous to me. I feel like a lost little girl right now where there is no actual help available. And the very act of asking for help somehow puts me in danger.
Mm-hmm.
So I need help, but I can't ask for help because that puts me in danger. So asking for help feels dangerous. And then there was a third thread in this too of, I think this is probably connected to what I just said. In this place of deeper surrender, humility, and asking for help, it does feel dangerous. It feels like, this is exactly what we're saying. It feels like other people are going to come in. They're going to take advantage of my vulnerability. They're going to take advantage of my openness. They're going to take what's mine and they're going to take it from me. And so the reason why I wanted to, that actually felt deep. I want to just, so yeah, we're just, we're potentially seeing and hearing very deep levels of Whitney Rose's psyche that typically remain in shadows. So just giving space to let this clear out. And the reason why I'm naming all this very explicitly, just to sort of come back to what you were saying earlier, I can feel the bind that she's in. If Whitney has learned this story early on that creating from within puts me in danger, puts me at risk of being humiliated, puts me at risk of something being taken from me, what I've learned, the story that's running in my operating system is I can't risk that. So I got to go out and do this another way.
Yes.
And I got to do it this way. And then what's happening is she's unconsciously choosing the path of easy money that feels safer to her on a certain level, but is totally based on scarcity. And again, I want to point out, MLMs are literally based on the idea of scarcity. We'll get into that, but it's literally based on the idea someone's losing at the end. There are winners and there are losers, and there is not enough to go around. That is an MLM to its core. It is literally based on scarcity. But then what she does is, because she's trying to keep herself safe in this way, and because she's trying to prove her worth in this way, because she's trying to get her last laugh in this way that is predicated on scarcity and her winning over others, she keeps herself locked unconsciously in this pattern where she's always chasing the win. She's always chasing the win. Someone's winning, someone's losing. She keeps herself locked in the scarcity mindset. So yes, I can really understand when she's over there looking at someone like Lisa Barlow, especially, we could include Meredith too, but, I think Lisa really represents in a lot of ways. I mean, Lisa goes for it and she creates, and she's created a lot for herself. And I think she comes from that place of abundance and very much unapologetically so, to the point that she triggers a lot of people. She loves the nice things. She likes to spend $60,000 a year on glam. She's unapologetic about it. I can imagine that would be very, very, and I also want to say she supports other people too. So she is the person who, when you ask her, will you donate thousands of dollars worth of liquor for my brand opening? She says yes. I mean, she's talked about this on social media. She literally purchased one of Whitney's $1,000 necklaces when she launched Prism. If you go back and watch the show, for the gripes that people had with Lisa's behavior last season, you do see her at the Prism event and, at Meredith's event being like, this is beautiful. Like she does walk the walk of actually supporting other people. So I can imagine that would be very triggering for Whitney.
Wow. Okay. So I'm writing notes, because what you said is, when we're talking about the safety of, and first of all, let's go back to the channel piece. Like, channeling a lot of actors, people, children, like, you're channeling energy all the time, right? And if you're receiving, you don't always know where that's coming from. And sometimes, like, if you're first doing it, it could be very destructive, right? Like, if you don't know where that energy is coming from, or if you're not connected to a source that's like very, strong for you, that you can always depend on and have deep faith in, it can be very confusing. So it's like, you can channel, like we were talking about in the last one, you have choice, the Lover's card, union of opposites. We have choice in what we do, but sometimes there's confusion on when it comes to subconscious material and channeling, you don't always know where that energy is coming from. You're not always conscious that you're choosing it at all. So that whole channeling thing can be very tricky for all of us, especially if you don't know that it's coming in and you're acting from it, especially it can be dangerous if you don't have an identity, okay, which you just discussed. So I want to go over that. I am, going back to the metaphysician Jesus, I am that I am, that I am, that I am. I am, right? I, as I am, like I exist and therefore I am. And I'm just going to say that slowly because I don't know if I'm explaining it, but it just means that you are enough as you are. There's nothing more that you need to produce. There's no manufacturing that needs to occur if you trust that I am. But if something of your I am was taken as a young girl and you don't know how to be safe, then when you're afraid something will be taken from you and you literally can't fully self-express, which will lead to becoming a fabricated page of swords where you have to craft and manufacture an actual Minnie Mouse voice, which I'm not taking from her. I actually think her voice is cute. And if she was speaking her truth, it would be adorable and cute and very much uniquely her own. But the way that she's utilizing it, everybody mimics it because they can feel there's a fabricated intention behind it. And I feel that she's jealous of people who have the I am. Lisa has a lot of personality traits that people get on her about all the time. She's very passionate, but she is Lisa. She is herself. And I think that's what triggers Whitney the most, is that she's unapologetically Lisa and she gets away with it. So that's the whole thing with Whitney, is she thinks people are getting away with things. And the reason that that's such a trigger for her is because she wants to take people down, as you so perfectly said, because the person who took from her innocence wasn't taken down. And the big lie was covered up. And so now, because that part of her is in the process of healing and is not on the other side of that, she wants to take down everybody on the outside who she thinks has what was taken from her. And that leads to her wanting to expose the big lie and therefore creating lies of her own, because she has learned that people who lie succeed. And so she's going in this sort of unconscious behavior. But it's also not having an identity, like borderline personality disorder, people who have that struggle with having no identity. And because they have that fear of abandonment, they're terrified that they have to manipulate and lie and act a certain way in order to get what they want because they don't think they'll be okay. And then when you also said she can't ask for help, that's a trait of narcissists have a hard time asking for help, right? Because it leaves the vulnerability. I loved what you said about also like the gifts and the voice. Her voice could be her gift, right? But it's almost like the way that she's utilizing it is like the shadow of her unutilized gifts and not being taught. I mean, a lot of times when people do have any sort of gifts, it's not like there's teaching on how to use it. I think maybe Jesus was trying to teach it, but it got distorted, right? So yeah, I think I loved what you also said about like her being okay is predicated over taking somebody else down, which is also what's going on in the world stage politically and also what leads to her and Heather's conflict with Lisa.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I am so drawn to this imagery we've sort of brought in of something being taken from her, because that's really what it felt like when I was dropping into her towards a more intentional business of like someone can come from behind and take something from me. And it feels like these cash grabs feel like I'm taking it back. And the word I keep hearing is like thief. Thief, thief, thief. Like she's like the archetype of the thief who's like grabbing what's hers because she learned it was once taken from her. Yes. So in order for her to get it back, she has to grab it from someone else, which again, to me, this just feels like the total energy of the MLM.
Page of Swords.
Yeah, I just love this because I feel like, Whitney has been such a mystery to me and I feel like I'm just feeling her so much more clearly now. Which again, it's just so interesting. I am still so drawn to the fact that this morning and even now I'm just suddenly able to drop into her when I couldn't before. So maybe there's something happening right now where, much like I feel like Tamara is being invited to really look at something in herself on a deeper level by the show. Maybe there is some sort of cosmic invitation for Whitney right now around like, there's an opening for you, like to really look at what you're doing. But when you talked about the big lie, And I'm going back now to sort of just even Whitney corrupting and commodifying spirituality for her financial gain, aka I'm taking back what's owed to me. I'm stealing what's rightfully mine before it can get taken from me.
Yes.
And then I think about what we were talking about, just about like the historical abuse of the church. I don't know. I don't have a concrete point about this, in part because I'm just not overly educated about religion and the history of religion and world religion. But I suddenly had this feeling of like, I feel on some level that Whitney's life probably really could be used as a metaphor for these themes of what we're talking about, like this intersection of commerce and religion. And again, speaking to this notion of someone who might be a channel for deeper themes and messages, I am just feeling her now as this possible sort of living, walking archetype of historical themes that want to come through. And I just felt that so strongly when I heard you say the words, the big lie. It actually kind of excites me because it feels so fun and magical. And if she could work with it consciously, it feels so potentially rich. But having said all that, and I'm having a feeling this might be connected, I was just sort of thinking about what you were saying about this notion of something being taken from her when she was young, and also this notion of power. And so how she then has to learn to wield the skills or the assets she does identify with in a way that is engineered towards getting the power or jockeying for the power position. And I did suddenly come back to just her relationship to her sexuality. And it's interesting because you actually brought in the possibility that she's a sexual healer of some kind. And just the way that, I want to tread lightly here because this is getting into potentially triggering territory. And again, we don't have a lot of details, but we have information, I believe, that she grew up and experienced sexual trauma. And then just seeing the way that it seems like sexualizes herself, the way she wields her sexuality, the way that she presents. And again, kind of wielding it in a way to get something rather than to give something. Although as I'm saying this, I'm like, I don't even know if I want to go down this road because it's so potentially like murky and triggering. But
yeah, well, I mean, I think that's an important thing to talk about because I'm a woman, 42, and when I was a child, unfortunately, had something taken from me too in this exact scenario, very similar, right? If her story is true, which of course I always believe people when they tell me their trauma, right? So I do believe that this happened to her. And there's a lot of different ways that all of us react when we are sexualized too early. And you either learn that your value is in pleasuring others, or you learn that your value is in being a pleasure center, right? Or being a good little girl, or being a certain way so that other people can love you and make you feel okay, right? So if that is what you're taught, and we're talking like 4 years old, if that's what you're taught, then you don't know how to be okay just as you are and let your innocence and creative energy, which is sex energy, to let it flow without it being used for somebody else's pleasure. If my creative, beautiful sexual energy cannot be expressed without being taken and exploited by somebody else for their benefit, then how am I supposed to trust the world that I'm in? And I was lucky because I had music and a voice, and I'm a singer and I'm a songwriter and I'm a creative person, and I've been an actor and singer my whole life. So I was able to channel all of that energy and heal through that creative form. But if she didn't have that creative form, it can just sort of turn into a personality that you cultivate. So like I also went through that for many years where I wore a lot of different masks, and I wanted to sort of act like Judy Garland, or I would act like I was an old actress at like age 16. And so you craft some safety masks that make you feel a little bit better. And it took me years to authenticate. Sexually, it took me years to authenticate because I thought my purpose was to please others. So I did like 2 years of a whole like abstinence where I was like literally asking myself, what do I like? God, please show me what I like sexually. Who am I? What do I like? And now it's beautiful and clear and the most pure thing ever. But it took years for me to strip away the conditioning. So like if she's in this position where she hasn't done that work, I do see the potentiality of her being able to empower her own sexuality as a tool of pure, like not feeling weird or guilty or having to utilize it to get something. But I think that this is not just for Whitney. I think this is for both men and women who have had that unfortunate thing taken from them. A lot of boys have had this taken from them. A lot of women have had this taken from them. And when you have that particular thing, because essentially sex energy is creative energy, which is the purest thing that we are given, it creates all things. And when somebody takes that from us, it's very difficult to know how to navigate and feel that you're going to be taken care of no matter what. Like I said, I had music. And then I later on I also became an alcoholic and had to quit drinking, right? So it's like the deconstruction of knowing how to deal with being also a channel. I didn't know how to deal with being a channel. So I drank and I self-sabotaged. And then, I still work with that. But for her, I just sort of feel like because she refuses to look at her behavior and the patterns, which you talk about, like her patterns of behavior, she refuses to look at them. She will only look outward at what other people are doing. And because she's refusing to do that, my question to you that I'm curious about is, is this somebody who has the capacity to have any self-responsibility? Because if she continues year after year after year to blame everybody else and to pretend to be perfect, then how can she potentially grow? Is she capable of self-responsibility? That's what I don't know.
Well, before I answer that question, thank you for sharing all that. It was beautiful. And it reminded me too of part of where this was coming from, because I was just thinking about that notion of scarcity and I'm taking what's mine and playing to win. And as I was holding these themes, it also reminded me of the origin story of Justin and Whitney's relationship, and
yes,
again, I hesitate to speak about it because we weren't there, we don't know all the details, but it's interesting to me that we're talking about taking what's mine in scarcity. And from a place of pattern, isn't it interesting that she ends up with an MLM king, which again, MLM, total scarcity, and that he's at the time, a married man. She's married too. It's like there's not enough to go around. Where both of them, it's like I'm taking something from someone else. Isn't that interesting? And if it's true, and again, I don't know this for a fact, but I remember hearing rumblings somewhere about the stories of, I won't even talk about it because it's sordid details, but like this wasn't necessarily, we're bashful about this and doing everything we can to resist it. From what I've heard, it was, we're jumping into this and it's hot and heavy. And so I think that's sort of what was coming up for me too, around like perhaps the way she wields and uses sexuality. Again, just to be clear, I am not saying she did that to ensnare Justin. I feel like I'm getting myself in all sorts of trouble. It's hard to talk about this in a way that...
No, 100%. We all have utilized sexuality to get what we want. Come on. Like that is just something that we have done. I think she truly loved him. I think he truly loves her. And I think they're in the right relationship. But yes, all of this is how she went to get him. I don't know. I'm sure that how their relationship came to be probably meant to be the patterns of how you get there and how I would hope that she's in a relationship where he says to her, listen, you don't have to seduce me. I'm going to love you anyway. And I think there's a lot of healing that probably occurs in this relationship. But oh my God. So when you said the married thing, like and him taking things and getting away with it, all of a sudden I heard an I win. So it's this like desire to be the chosen one. If she was also abused by somebody who was probably an older man who probably was in a marriage and she felt like she was the chosen one, but was she really chosen if that person who abused her was in a marriage? Or if that person who was abused her was not available to her fully, then she's going to have this desire to be the chosen one and win. And that leads us to the like taking Lisa down or taking other people down. The only way you can win is by taking something from somebody else. That's what you're talking about. You're talking about the MLM. We're talking about the thief, the Page of Swords. Like, I will feel more secure if I take a married man for myself. I'm not saying that she is... I think they're supposed to be together. I think it all worked out. Obviously, if people are cheating, they're not meant to be in the relationship prior. I have no judgment about that. And so it's just more for her. It's like, I win this time. This time I win. Maybe this time, So it's Liza Minnelli, Cabaret, Sally Bowles.
I mean, it's interesting because I feel like my answer is changing. Like, I feel like in context of this conversation where things feel like they're getting so much more clarified and clear, I do feel the possibility, but I think, the image I get, it's really interesting because when I drop into Whitney towards the idea of starting an intentional, viable, legitimate business, and I talked about that feeling of being lost and feeling vulnerable, it was this sense, or it is this sensation of, like I said, sort of this little girl who's sort of like lost in this wide open world. It almost feels like this vast expanse of landscape, and it's all white and it's just so wide open and there's so much space. And in this experience, that actually feels very scary to me. But when I think about the possibility of her being supported to take responsibility for herself and to integrate all these things we're talking about, I see it as a space where there is actually a lot of space. And she's like working with someone or with people where there is a deep sense of trust and they go really slowly. And there's just all the room in the world to start unpeeling these layers. And for her, I mean, on a fundamental level, to really have the feelings that she needs to have. So if they are, presumably going to be tracing things back and revisiting the scene of the original crimes where something was taken from her, and especially, things taken from her in a very traumatizing way connected to her sexuality, she needs space for the battle cry, for the grief, for the hysteria, for all, I'm sure, all these hugely strong currents of energy that haven't moved through her. And then what I'm saying too is, like, if we're onto something about her being a channel who also carries things for history, for lineage, for the collective, she's got to let those feelings move through her, because I'm sure those are stuck in her body on some level as well. So I just think it's interesting. I think she's scared of the wide open space where she's not in control. And yet it also feels like she needs wide open space where there's room for her truth to be heard, seen, reflected, and witnessed, and for her to have room to go wherever the fuck she needs to go. And it's literally like, the image I'm getting is like, whoever's helping her, it's like they can't be too close to her. I don't see them touching her. They need to be there as like witnesses and guides and support. But I'm getting chills as I'm saying this. The words that are coming through is she needs space. Like, she needs lots of space to just claim it all, express it all, and then be seen, heard, and witnessed for it, which it feels like she never got that.
So fascinating. You ended with seen and heard and witnessed for it. And it's so funny because Meredith's husband's like, I feel that we are finally talking about Whitney. And I feel like this is what she ultimately does want to be spoken about, to be seen. I think she gets really scared when she's not in the center, and her shadow, just like a child, acts out when they want attention. Like, she had to do all of this, like power grabbing energy and all this stirring of the pot and all this year after year to finally become the focus. Right. And now she's saying she's in her villain era. And what would it be like if she actually saw and heard herself in the way that you're describing, to give herself the space for that? So yeah, I think she has a lot of control issues. And so if she were able to do the work that you're describing, then she wouldn't need to be seen by manipulation. And that would be really powerful for her. And I think a lot of people struggle with this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. It's so funny, Molly. Like, I always hesitated doing a Whitney deep dive because I was fearful of, like, how do you even get underneath someone so enigmatic and, to my mind, kind of seemingly fractured. And I feel like we're really getting somewhere.
All right.
So I hope this helps Whitney. Okay. So this story breaks. Dana Wilkie breaks the story while they're filming the show. So I watched some of the YouTube videos of the content creator Up and Adam, who is the guy that she called on the show to get confirmation that it was quote unquote Lisa who leaked the story. One of the things that he said in one of his videos where he was explaining everything that was so interesting to me, it was so interesting to me. So I guess, I don't know, it was either Dana Wilkie or him. Someone was reporting that when the story broke, Whitney said, like, they were talking to Whitney behind the scenes, and Whitney said to them, "Oh, well, we're starting up filming.
Yep.
And I bet one of the women is doing this to stir stuff up for the sake of the show," right? Which I thought that was really interesting on a couple levels, because first of all, if you go back to what sort of kicked off this latest leg of conflict between Whitney and Lisa, it was Whitney going on the Viall Files and talking shit about Lisa. Now, when I listened to the clips of Whitney talking shit about Lisa back when the season started, because it's kicked off in the season premiere, my first hit on that, and so mind you, this was way before I ever heard what Whitney said, or what Up and Adam said Whitney said to him about the women trying to stir up shit for the show. When I listened to Whitney talking shit about Lisa and the Viall Files, my first instinct was, oh, they're about to film. They're literally going into season 5. She's kicking something up right now for the sake of the show. And she's sort of loving doing this for the sake of the show.
100%.
And what I also, we have a few things in here. And my other feeling about it too, and I think this sort of gets into some interesting stuff. I also felt on some level it was in response to what happened at the reunion for season 4. Because if you remember, in the season 4 reunion, Lisa was very clear about the way in which Whitney kind of set her up to look like an asshole, where Whitney painted this narrative that Lisa was a shitty friend because she didn't check in on her about Whitney's friend's death, and that like Lisa was really self-absorbed, and ran with that, right? And at the reunion, Lisa was very clear to say, that's actually not true. It's literally not what happened. I literally asked you repeatedly. You told me I was checking in on you too much. And so then I backed off. And then you ran with this narrative that I wasn't checking in on you enough. And I don't know why, but thankfully they did. Production actually showed the footage that confirmed what Lisa said. And I want to say, part of me is bringing this in because it is sort of shocking to me that this isn't being talked about more, that literally footage was withheld that made Whitney's story look true. And then it was proven that Whitney was completely concocting this and that Lisa was telling the truth about this. But the reason why I'm saying all this is, so Lisa debunked Whitney's lies at the reunion, and then there was this backup video to support Lisa debunking it. And I do want to say, as a little digression, to me, it totally speaks to your point about somehow Whitney gets away with this stuff, because even though that did happen at the reunion, I really feel like there was very little chatter about it. I feel like there was very little discussion about the fact that there was literally footage provided to back up what Lisa was saying about how deeply Whitney was lying and manipulating the situation. Having said that, I did feel on a certain level, or suspect or intuitively hypothesize, that part of her going onto the Viall Files and talking shit about Lisa in this way was, at least in part, a reaction to her mask being ripped off at the reunion and kind of going tit for tat. And, because in a way, Lisa exposed her for being a villain in that situation. And so then what does Whitney do? She goes on the Viall Files and says, Lisa's always been the villain, and here are all the reasons why. So to me, it even kind of feels like it energetically connects in some ways to this idea of like, you take something from me, I'm going to take something from you. But regardless, she goes on the Viall Files. She, goes tit for tat. I felt that she was very much doing this also in part to start like stirring stuff up for season 5. So it was very interesting to me that when she was talking to Up and Adam originally about the Dana Wilkie video about her selling from Alibaba, her response was, oh, I bet one of the women sent it to her to stir this up for the sake of shooting the television show. And so, again, I'm just bringing this in because, from this place where it does feel like Whitney really does project outward and she accuses people of doing the things that she in fact does, it just sort of struck me that way of like, isn't it interesting that this was your first response as to why this was suddenly showing up in the zeitgeist? So this comes up on the show, right? And first, Lisa brings it up to Meredith. Meredith brings it up to Heather. Heather brings it up to Whitney. Now, what Whitney does is kind of a thing of brilliance, because if you'll notice right away, well, first of all, I just love the sheer irony of her being just scandalized that people would talk about her business. And she literally says, like, this is my business. This is my brand, And as we've explored before, she literally started the show, I think episode number 1, sullying Lisa's business. So it's just so rich that she's so scandalized about this. And Lisa's even said the reason why she brought this up on the show was essentially to say to Whitney, it doesn't feel so good when people talk about your businesses. Like, do you see how destructive this is right now? Which we could make a case that that was not Lisa taking the high road, but it's just to say Whitney has already been the purveyor of talking about people's businesses and brands. So her outrage is kind of amusing to me, let's say.
Except Jen. She kind of was always kind of quiet around Jen Shaw, which leads to the MLM, because she might have had more familiarity with that type of business. She only attacks legitimate businesses.
Well, it's true. And also what's interesting is you may remember when the news broke about Jen and they were on that Sprinter van, it was Whitney who had all this very specific knowledge of what the charges were and what the exact nature of Jen's fraud. And I remember at the time, people sort of loved it because it was exhilarating because she was breaking it down in such a clear way. But now in retrospect, you kind of have to wonder, is there a reason why she was so well-versed in these topics of wire fraud and what Jen was doing and fraudulent leads and all that? Okay. So what I think is so brilliant and masterful about what Whitney has done is, if you notice, she never actually speaks to the content of Dana Wilkie's post, which was essentially to say, we have proof that she is upselling Alibaba. Now, well, okay, she does, when she's asked about it, she's like, no, we didn't do that. And she keeps peddling this line, we work with curated vendors, right? But if you notice, she never addresses the smoking gun, which is that her website literally used the Alibaba photos. I mean, there's no mistaking that, right? So she never addresses that. She never speaks to that. And what's kind of amazing about what she does is, instead of dealing with the content of the rumor, where there's literal proof of the fact that she's doing this, she somehow spins this into an issue of someone planted that story. Who was it? That becomes the storyline. That becomes the area of focus. It's like she throws a smoke bomb where all the attention becomes, someone did this to me. And what's amazing about it, to your point, it's not just that someone did this to me to try to harm me, because she's still hiding behind this absurd, easily disproved notion that it's not true, that she is in fact this, respectable businesswoman who is selling viable, spiritually, ethically sourced, intentionally curated jewelry pieces. She's now spinning it into a narrative where not only did one of my castmates plant this story to try to hurt me, but they're also planting the story to try to hurt me in a way that is telling lies about me, which just means she's totally twisting this into a narrative where she is now being victimized.
100%. There's a ton of comments from people saying this. They're like, we're sick of your victim stories. And then she also has been like, a lot of comments are like, you're a production puppet, because production favors Whitney. I mean, they let her have testimonials where she makes fun of everyone. She never gets called out at reunions or asked any questions. And it's so funny because she's always like, I'm calling you out. And she has never really accounted for anything. And I agree. I think that she has strategy, that she utilizes strategy, like the Page of Swords, right? Like, I'm going to use my mental acuity to get what I want in a sly page, sort of like thievery way. For example, she's really good at getting Lisa where she wants her. So, for example, if Minnie Mouse is the voice that she's using to get what she wants out of life, and to that whole thing where you can get what you want if you say it with sugar, this whole sort of, it's almost like a Southern Belle technique to get what you want. If you say it really nicely, you can get whatever you want type of thing. There's a whole camp of people who literally respond to tone. And you'll see in comments that the only beef that Whitney fans have against Lisa is her tone. And even on the Alpha, or whatever, how you pronounce it, the files or whatever, that he was siding with Whitney because he doesn't like Lisa's acting out or tone, almost like women can never get
angry when lies are being spread about them year after year after year. Like, how dare Lisa raise her voice? And then Whitney she is literally smiling at many, many moments once she gets Lisa upset. And then Lisa's looking right at her. She shouldn't be, because she's energetically taking the bait. Lisa looks at Whitney in the eye, sees Whitney smiling, and then Lisa starts to get more activated, therefore making her become the villain, which is the mistake, but it's also the trap. It's like she needs to not give the eye contact, because Whitney's literally looking at her like, yes, she's doing what I want her to do. And this is all like a setup. And that is a strategy that she's choosing to use.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying this, because the point that I wanted to make, I didn't bring it all together. I established the different threads, and then I didn't make my concluding point. When I think about Whitney saying, I think my castmates leaked this in order to generate story for the show, what I get off of Whitney and all of this is this story leaked, right? And so it's like she knew she was likely going to have to deal with this. And I really feel like the machinations in Whitney's mind is, okay, the way I'm going to play this is I'm going to use this as a storyline, as a show. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to pivot it from, again, the content of the actual, I'm calling it a rumor, but it's really not rumor. There's photographic evidence. The content of the rumor in the post. And I'm going to deflect from that issue. And instead, I'm going to run with, almost like as a preemptive defense, someone planted it. And now, as Lisa said, Whitney drew, I've got to investigate to see who did it. And so suddenly that is where all the attention is going. And it's worked. That's what's crazy to me, because I'm just sort of sitting here the whole time being like, wait, why isn't anyone just asking her, why were these photos on your website? Why is no one asking her this? And even when you go, I like to go onto the online forums just to see what people are saying. And I'm not really seeing anyone say, why were those photos on the website? It has become all about who leaked the story, and was it Lisa, and this phone call and that phone call. So I want to say, it's almost shocking to me that it works, because when I look back on it, to me, it looks so transparent. But I really think that she consciously made a strategy play of, I'm going to get ahead of the story by putting my own slant on it. And then if you watch what she does, because the clues that she starts, she tried to put her target on Meredith. That was so interesting, right? Where she tried to sort of make Meredith the target, but then kind of to your point, these quote unquote clues, I'm really using sarcastic air quotes here, because as we're going to itemize them, they're not clues of anything. But Whitney starts gathering these clues that then lead to Lisa. So then she just sets her sights on Lisa. But it's like the first clue is that Lisa either accidentally or intentionally left the necklace, her prism necklace, in the hotel room, in the hotel room trash. So that's clue number one, which, by the way, what? How is that a clue of anyone leaking anything to Dana Wilkie, right? It's not a clue to anything.
No, that's just a narcissistic wound is what that is.
But she wields it with such confidence, and she talks about it with such confidence that you're almost tempted to believe the way she's connecting the dots, as Lisa says. But if you actually look at the dots, it doesn't prove anything. And so then the next clue for her is this staged call with Up and Adam, when she's, she makes this call. Well, actually, Adam calls her, right, when she's in the car with Justin. Now, even that, Up and Adam has now come out and clarified this was a premeditated, essentially staged call. And I'm just pointing that out because the phone rings and Whitney looks down at it and says, "Oh, it's Adam," and feigns surprise. So she's already in the performance of it all. Now, what Up and Adam has revealed is that this scene was edited that really kind of betrayed the actual content of the conversation. So the actual content of the conversation, for people who don't know, is Adam did reach out to Dana Wilkie, and Dana said it was not Lisa Barlow who leaked this information. That was one part of the conversation. Now, apparently, there was a whole other separate issue that Whitney had been bringing to Adam, and I guess I'll explain this because maybe it's relevant, where there had been another Instagram account that I guess had been disparaging Whitney and Justin's daughter, Bobby. And Whitney was concerned that Monica Garcia from last season was behind that account. And I guess Whitney had been contemplating opening back up a friendship with Monica, presumably for the sake of the show. But she had been contemplating getting back in relationship with Monica, but she didn't want to get back into relationship with Monica if it turned out that Monica was the one behind this Finsta that was disparaging Bobby. So she also had Adam put out his feelers for, is Monica the one who's behind this account? So basically, on this phone call with Whitney, after Adam has clarified, and I just want to stress this enough, he literally clarified it was not Lisa who planted the story. I want to not gloss over that because that becomes really important in terms of where this all goes next. But the second part of the conversation is Adam saying, and I love how convoluted this is, he didn't talk to the person who ran the Instagram account that was disparaging Bobby Rose. He talked to someone who apparently knows a lot of the people who run these accounts. And that's the person who he was asking, essentially, can you tell me who this was? And that person who knows a lot of these people who run the accounts said, well, what I've been hearing is it is someone in the friend group. I won't say who. And that's when Adam was like, okay, well, let me ask you some questions. Do they run a med spa? Do they have a jewelry line? Do they have an alcohol line? Right? And that's when the person said they have an alcohol line. So what production did is they edited the scene to make it look like that portion of the conversation, which was really about a whole other Instagram account that had nothing to do with Prism, they edited it to look like Adam was confirming that the rumor was that Lisa was the one who fed it to Dana. So, I mean, there's so much we can say about that just right then and there. But the first thing that I want to just bring in first and foremost is this was not a clue pointing to Lisa's guilt. And what's amazing is when he says that on the phone,
I know
Whitney and Justin look at each other as if they have this smoking gun, even though this has nothing to do with the Prism rumor. And so this is one of her hot clues that throughout the rest of the season, she's saying, I've got verbal confirmation that it was you, which again is just crazy because we now know it literally was the opposite. So she's literally just taking these...
And so does production. Production knows that too. And they're allowing this to happen, which is also very interesting.
Well, yeah, but before we get to the production piece, again, I just want to name just the most obvious part of this, which is she is taking things that literally disprove her theory and treating them as smoking guns and clues as to why it proves her theory and then running with it, which to me is just even more proof in my mind that she just kind of had a narrative she wanted to go with to deflect away from the core content of the original message. And as I'm saying this, what I'm feeling from Whitney is it's I'm rubbing my hands together as a stereotypical villain. It's it's go time. I've got my narrative. I'm going to go with it. And then I think to the point that you were making earlier, yes, I think that Whitney knows how to provoke people. 100%. And Lisa walks right into it because this being lied about is one of Lisa's deepest triggers and hot buttons. So if you tell a lie about Lisa, it is a surefire way to get her to go off. And the second she goes off, Whitney has her right where she wants her because this is Whitney's stock and trade. It's let me just bring in a bunch of things that deflect from the real issue. Let me poke you so you have a reaction. Now we're talking about your reaction rather than what started this whole thing in the first place.
And if what drives her comes from something being taken from her, then it makes sense that she feels fulfilled and vindicated when she gets away with something and quote unquote wins by taking somebody else down. And the thing that's amazing to me, and I just love everything you were saying, because season after season after season, a lot of times she is toe to toe with other people talking gossip, but nobody ever really talks to her about it. For example, even with the Angie K thing, she was talking with Meredith about Angie K's husband being gay at the same level that Meredith was saying. She said, I heard it too. And then she's the one who went and told Angie that Meredith said it. And I'm always how you were saying, this just seems so obvious to me. That's how I felt about Whitney since season 1. This just seems so obvious to me that she is stirring up a bunch of nonsense and getting away with it. And I literally think that's her juice. How do I get away with something? How can I craft and manufacture? When I think of her, the word fabricated comes to mind. And I've been saying that for a while. So when the Alibaba stuff came out, I was yeah, fabricated. And I think she gets something out of it. I think she gets like a hit, like a little like sort of addiction power hit every time she gets away with a lie.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's so much I want to say. Just to piggyback on what you just said, not only was she gossiping about Angie's husband with Meredith, but I really believe she was also the one who really, like, I don't know how to say this because Monica's responsible. Like, Monica went with it of her own accord, so Monica's responsible for Monica. But Whitney, I definitely felt like set Monica up to take that baton and run with it. And again, they sort of touched on it in the reunion, but there's this way that it never gets fully named and called out. And I want to say that it's so interesting. I do think this is part of Whitney's superpower because just a few minutes ago when I said, wait, I don't want to gloss over the fact that literally Up and Adam disproved that Lisa was the one to feed this Alibaba thing to Dana Wilkie. The reason why I said that was I could almost feel myself breezing past that part. Like, that's the thing. Whitney is so good at what she does because what she did was she engineered this hot topic confrontation with Lisa, where Lisa goes off and then it bleeds into Justin and John almost coming to blows. And again, it's like, even as a content creator, I'm like, okay, well, we need to get over there because that's the juice. And it's like, we totally skip past. And isn't it just so interesting, just from a place of like symbolism, right? And life being a waking dream, that production did cut out that part of the conversation and edited it to look like it supports Whitney's version of the events because it's literally her getting this information that it unequivocally was not Lisa who planted that story. It just totally gets lost in the background.
This is where I've had my little theories about her in production, okay? But this is where I also think the voice, the tone, and the fabricated technique of how one speaks and what is appropriate and what's not appropriate really works in her favor. And similar to like, look, like this is going on in the world stage. Like Trump gets away with a lot of things because he puts the focus elsewhere, this, that, and the other. But it's also just about playing on people's sort of vulnerabilities of like, oh yeah, that person's yelling. That's not good. This, that, and the other. But she does it in a way. And so does Justin. I mean, her and Justin could potentially have this bond of appearing to be like the nice, soft-spoken, like this, just the sweet of the salt of the earth, just so sweet, just so sweet. And their bond is over like getting away with like having these schemes or whatever, but doing it in a way that sort of facilitates them looking innocent and playing the innocent while doing like a wolf in sheep's clothing situation. It's really working for her. And so I've always felt like this is like the way in which she's able to wield language too. Like the way that she uses language, which is very Libran. Like a Libra likes to be spoken to a certain way and talk a certain way, and they're Venusian and they know how to wield the narrative through saying it in a very specific way. And being able to do that, I think maybe she could even be a writer in the sense that like, this is where she feels the most alive is when her stories that she's creating that are not real or true are becoming believed by people and she's able to get them on her camp. I think this is really where she gets her juice. The problem with this type of juice is that it runs out and she's going to still feel empty.
Like an MLM, it runs out. You know, what I was going to say before that like relates to everything you just said too. It's like when you talk about how this sort of gets her activated and like getting away with something gets her activated, it was like the voice that I heard or what I felt was almost like, yeah, this voice that basically says the system let me down.
Like Lisa. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now I get to take something from the system. You know, it's really, yeah, I don't know. It just feels so clear to me. I felt something similar a bit with Jen Shah, actually, with what I was kind of feeling into her schemes and crimes. But yeah, to me, it feels very connected to what we've already brought in this notion of like, I'm taking what's mine. Like, okay, like I got victimized by the system. I wasn't heard. I wasn't believed. Something was taken from me. Well, guess what?
Yes.
I'm going to take something from the system and I'm going to do it in this sneaky way and I'm going to get away with it. And this is how I experience my power. And I think to what we're saying, I'm going to wield the tools that I were told kind of give me currency. So if I was sexualized, right, I get to use my sexuality. If I was infantilized and not heard, not believed, not supported to be in my power, well, then I'm going to kind of act like the innocent little girl victim who talks in this halting way. I mean, it almost feels similar to what we were exploring with She Who Shall Not Be Named. It's like, okay, if this is the position you're going to put me in, I'm going to take these tools and I'm going to run with them. And then I'm going to steal back what's mine, and you're never going to fucking know that I even did it. And this is where and how I feel my power.
The word charm is coming to mind, which is like a magic trick. I can hypnotize you with my charm. And I feel like she has a relationship with production where she gets to do these sort of cute little like jabs at the girls, but she does it in like a funny little way where it's charming and cute. And like it appears to be non-threatening, but it's actually quite a dig. And production sort of lets her do this. They very much let her do what she wants when it comes to how she tells stories. And the word charm, like a charm, I'm going to charm them. I'm going to charm them. That seems to be something else too, that she's really able to sort of tap into and use. But the problem and the sad thing, the thing that makes me sad for her, and when I do think of her, I think of anger and I think of sadness and emptiness. The thing that makes me sad is that all of this are techniques. When you live your life based off of techniques to get what you want, they're rooted in manipulation. Like, what is it like to live in that type of space all the time? It is not a very fun place to be.
It's so interesting because even when you talk about techniques, like she's all techniques, again, it just kind of reminds me of the spirit of MLM, where like you're shilling a product, but the product is really just a placeholder for the scam and grabbing what's yours. It's like this empty placeholder that is about, I mean, it's almost literally like a legal technicality because there's a product involved. That's what technically prevents it from just being a pyramid scam that could be shut down. And I just feel that energetic flavor of what we're talking about of like techniques. You know what I mean? It's funny too, because the way that I've experienced, I don't know if I've talked about this on a podcast before, but when I see Justin and Whitney in their home having their conversations, and they'll have some sort of staged conversation and then they'll like, I don't know, go upstairs or whatever. It's like the images that I get in my mind's eye, it's almost like I experience their home as a set. And when they leave the room and go into a doorway that's off camera, I visualize them like going, it's like the set ends and then they're on like a studio lot. Like that's what their whole life feels like to me. It feels like you could just knock over the walls of their house because it's not actually a house. It's like a set. It's this sense of just like artifice. There's nothing holding this all together. It's the image of something rather than an embodied, or to use your language, kind of like having a real rich internal life, which again just sort of comes back to me as like Whitney is this potential channel, like this in one way sort of empty vessel that just sort of relies on tricks and techniques. But there could be a version of this where she's like a deeply embodied sort of channel for wisdom. But it's also interesting too, because one of the questions that I've always had for myself with people like Whitney, and I feel like, very much like Ashley Darby on Potomac is someone who might be similar, but people who sort of generate conflict on the shows for the sake of conflict. And it's just interesting because I always have this question in my mind of like, but what's the end game? Like, I don't get it. I don't get it, and it's so funny because when I sort of dropped into that too, I was like, oh, this is the same MLM energy, because the fact is, the more that you generate this conflict, ultimately you're just backing yourself into a corner, which is what started to finally happen. I mean, that's what we saw in the premiere. It's like her cast members finally got fed up and they were just like, Whitney, we're not doing this with you anymore. But it is again, that spirit. I think of MLM as like a game of musical chairs, right? It's like the very nature of musical chairs is there's only so many chairs and everyone races to grab their chair. And we all know there's going to be someone who doesn't get a chair. That is the nature of MLM, right? Someone's losing out at the end. Because even if the MLM works perfectly, right? I thought this was such an interesting fact. I watched a whole John Oliver segment on MLMs because I really wanted to get more educated about them. And one of the experts basically said, if every person who joins the pyramid scheme or the MLM successfully just finds 5 other people, like recruits 5 other people to sign up, that can only last for 13 cycles because that's the point where you run out of people in the world. And, that's really where it clicked home for me, where it's like, the reason why pyramid schemes are illegal and the reason why MLMs are so sketchy is because we know just by virtue, like even if this works in the most perfect way possible, there is an endpoint where someone doesn't get a chair, where people have earned money at the expense of someone down the line losing money. And we all know that. And that's why we've got to scramble for our chairs and grab the money while we can, because we don't want to be the one who loses. And so when I bring this back to the Ashley Darbys and the Whitney Roses who just sort of generate conflict, it was that feeling in me of like, and you've sort of been speaking to this, okay, the show is a type of success. This is where I get to generate a sense of power and prestige, but I got to grab what I can when I can to keep this going. Because again, kind of like what you're saying, I don't trust myself to be enough. I don't trust my very being to show up to the show and to bring whatever's going on in my life and my real-time honest reactions to what's happening. I do not trust that to be enough as currency on the show. So to keep my position, I'm going to play musical chairs with the drama. And it really did start feeling to me of like a cash grab. It's a drama grab. This is relevancy. And then meanwhile, to bring in everything that we're talking about, if I'm getting away with it and activating other people in the process and they're falling for my little scheme, well, all the better. Because not only am I getting the power and the prestige of fame and a certain amount of money, but then I'm also getting my own personal satisfaction that I love from subverting the system, in all many different ways that I do this in my life.
I loved what you're talking about. Like when you were first talking about it, you were talking about like the stage lot. I was thinking, I said like they're a wolf in sheep's clothing. And then I thought, like, as you're talking about that, it's like you huff, you puff, you blow the house down. And, we're in the season of, like, I was talking about, like, the Scorpio, the detective, the unveiling, the sort of like the seeing the death of delusion, right? And like scorpionic energy too, like Scorpios in particular, a lot of times they have power issues and control issues because the self-deceit, it takes them a long time. They can detect when other people are lying because they have an enormous amount of self-deceit. So they have to go through the Phoenix rising and the transformation process in order to actually see clearly and see things as they are for themselves first, through figuring out where they can eradicate the self-deceit and see things as they are, which means that they have to surrender control, which some Scorpios can never do because it's such a rooted element of who they are. But once they do, they find ultimate freedom. And that sort of reminds me of what we're talking about with her too. But it's also like, if this illusion is deconstructed, and this brings it back to what you said about Lisa bringing up her tactics in that reunion, that is her biggest fear. That if it's sort of what always I say reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. If you pull back the curtain and see him overworking, like that'll break the big illusion. And I think that's one of her biggest fears too. But I think it's funny when you're talking about her and Ashley Darby, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. They're technically called TV personalities. The word personality is there. So if she doesn't feel that she has a strong identity or personality, then she feels she's fucked. And a lot of times too, like people have sort of said like, well, who is Whitney anyways? Like Mary called her a bobblehead. Like Meredith's husband's like, oh, who cares? It's just Whitney. Like she has just sort of been like, whatever, like, because her personality has been like talking about other people and playing telephone, but we're not really sure who she really is. Her and Justin, like I agree. We don't really know them too well. So it's sort of like, if your job is a TV personality and you don't know what your personality is necessarily, or it's sort of wavering in the air, like a huff, puff, you blow your house down, like if the structures are not finite and you're not connected to the infinite because you come from scarcity, then I would imagine that's a very scary place to live. And what brings me back to the word desperate, when you say, what is the end game? They're so desperate that they haven't even thought that far, because they don't believe that they'll ever be okay. And when you don't believe that you're ever going to be okay, you start acting, all of your motives become like the here and now. I got to get what I want here and now. I am desperate, right? And so that's sort of the word that comes to mind when I think about it. And I also think that her and Justin's bond is overworking this sort of way with the system too. I think that's a big part of their bond. That's probably like a little secret that they have together.
Yeah, it's like oversaturated resources. I want to comment about Justin. So just circling this back around to the interweaving of like spirituality and the scam, it just makes so much sense to me because, I know we're in agreement with this. Like I too, truly believe, Whitney really went through something. And I truly believe there is a spiritual calling in her. But it would make sense if we're onto something with what we're talking about, and this is someone who resents the system, feels let down by the system, doesn't believe she's safe to be in integrity, it makes so much sense that if there is something in her that is called to spirit and to a true spiritual life and is called, look, her soul chose something very deep and intense. I mean, whatever she went through was so intolerable that, as we've mentioned before, I mean, she's repressed huge chunks of her childhood. Because and it always feels important to mention, I believe it's not just that she's saying she repressed the memories of abuse. From what I understand, it's like she's repressed just entire chunks of her childhood. So if her soul chose this very intense journey where there's this intense experience of reclaiming memories, self-revelation, I mean, essentially the invitation that we're talking about to go inward, to reclaim my actual truth, to liberate who I actually am. Like, if these are all parts of hopefully who she's meant to be in this lifetime and what she's here to do in the master, but there's a fundamental distrust in her sense of safety to live that and embody that, and a fundamental resentment towards the system, it makes so much sense then that she'd be like, oh, okay, universe, spirit, like you're beckoning me into like deep spiritual self-revelation and surrender. Well, okay, I'm going to do this my way. And I'm going to do it in a way where I cheat the system. I cheat the spiritual system. I cheat the financial system. I cheat the pop culture system. I cheat the marital system in terms of like us both being partnered. When, you know what I mean? It's like, it makes total, like, again, if we're onto something in terms of feeling that part of, again, I'm rubbing my hands together in that evil way. And like, I get the last laugh. Ha 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 ha. It makes total sense. It's the ultimate unconscious fuck you. To God, to spirit. It's like, okay, you guys, you're going to take me on this journey? I don't think so. I fucking win. I'm going to sell my Alibaba placeholder, fake fabricated pieces in the spirit of spirit, and I'm going to earn a lot of fucking money, and I'm going to get the last laugh. So I just wanted to say, like, that just feels so clear to me now. But what I also wanted to say too, it's like when you were talking about her tricks and her techniques and the way she uses language, it's like, yeah, the inversion, right, of the mystic and the integrated mystic. I just started getting these images of, I'm getting chills, the occult, hermetic symbols, hypnosis, wielding mystical tools for selfish gain and advantage, and just sort of feel, I'm like, actually like, I'm getting a little nausea as I say that. Like,
no, I feel that for her. I feel that for her in her eyes. And when she's like, if you go back to the scene at Angie's party, when Lisa's like getting really activated and Lisa's giving her direct eye contact, look at how Whitney's looking back at Lisa, and you'll see that's what I'm talking about.
Well, it's so interesting you say that too, because what I've noticed is every time someone even brings Lisa up, it doesn't matter what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I just can almost feel like there's something in Whitney. It's almost like she starts salivating, like her eyes go wide.
She does. Yeah.
You can just see that she's ready for it. She is ready to leap onto anything. I mean, I honestly believe that Bronwyn or whomever could sit there and say, oh, you know what? I saw Lisa get into her time machine and go back in time and kill an old woman and steal her money and then like come back to the present and like lick the blood off her fingers and said that was fun. And Whitney would be like, start nodding and agreeing, and be like, uh-huh. And I heard the same thing from, it's like, yes. She is just so ready to, she's so preoccupied with Lisa. But that was a little bit of a digression.
No, because of the I am, because Lisa has an inner, and also here's the other thing. As you were talking before, I was sort of thinking about like, what if Whitney has zero faith? What if she thinks it's all a scam? Then of course she's going to scam. But Lisa has a ton of faith. Say what you want about her. Say what you want about Mormons. Lisa believes. She is a believer. And she is always coming from that place. And she's got personality like this, that, and the other. But like, she believes in God. Like, she has cried and said how much she loves God and that God loves her. Like, that is her belief. And if Whitney doesn't have that, that is going to be a huge source of contention.
What I want to say before I know you have to go, though, about Justin, I mean, Justin is so interesting because I feel like this past episode in particular, and maybe this also speaks to what I was saying earlier about there might be an invitation here. I mean, just the very fact that we're having this conversation about Whitney now is interesting to me because, again, as I've said, I've actively stayed away from Whitney for a long time. So it's just even interesting that we're even talking about Whitney and that there might be something in the zeitgeist or in the ether now that's sort of inviting her into possible deeper clarity and self-responsibility. But that aside, Justin does often just kind of seem like a deer in the headlights on the show. And it almost seems like he's just sort of going along with whatever Whitney does or says. I mean, I've often experienced sometimes in early seasons, sometimes when I see them playing out their storylines, I've kind of wondered, it's almost felt to me like Whitney hasn't prepared him for what the scene's going to be. And she starts going off on, well, Justin, you took off your wedding ring and we're having troubles in our marriages. And I almost sometimes I'm like, I feel like Justin never got the script beforehand. And he's just...
Unless she wants him to.
Well, so this is what I'm saying, though. But then this last episode, when he was pouring the Vita tequila and the Blue Jay seltzer down the sink, again, I mean... Oh my God, everything they do just feels so fucking premeditated. Like Whitney comes in and be like,
fabricated.
Justin, what are you doing? Oh, Whitney, I just happened to decide to do this right now in this moment and you caught me doing it. It's like everything just feels so fabricated. But when I was watching him do that, I was just like, I really felt a new side of Justin, which again, it makes total sense. This is a guy who's earned his he's earned his living off MLMs. And, much like the point we were making about Whitney, this is a guy whose marriage started based on lies. I mean, it makes total sense, but I just totally suddenly experienced that part of him. It's like, oh, you really get mileage out of playing the role of the nice, almost, I don't know if I want to say helpless, but kind of like, shucks, helpless guy who's just going with the flow. And it's like, you're hiding your hand in a major way.
We saw it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you kind of love this and you love sort of playing this game and you love acting this out with Whitney. I don't know.
They do. They love it.
Yeah. I experienced him in this whole new way in that scene.
Yeah, they're very much like doing this together like little children in the sandbox. Like, let's see if we can mess with these people and get away with it.
And it is interesting because, I didn't do any real drop-ins towards Justin. It would be interesting to do that. But, the genesis of that fight between him and John, and, I think Justin's even acknowledged this, is that Justin did have this flare-up of a rage that we've never really seen from him, right? So it's just interesting. It's like things are coming.
It's specifically the word lie, because that would, of course, trigger them. It's so funny that everybody, like some people were like, oh, well, Lisa's reactions because she's guilty. It's like, no, it's the opposite. When somebody is lying about you, like I felt so bad for Lisa. She had like a trauma response. She was hyperventilating. She's like, I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to, because I feel has been dealing with this so often. It's like season after season with Whitney, and Whitney's calm, smiling. I got her where I wanted her and all of this stuff. But then Justin, when she comes over and she goes, she's a liar. He goes, that was the thing that triggered him the most. She's not a liar. And he did physically step towards her. He was 100% aggressive. And then I love this conversation of like, who's supposed to apologize here, right? Like, who started it? Now the conversation, and Whitney says so perfectly, she says in her testimonial, that was very inappropriate for Lisa to run over to my husband, so she is able to wield it of like, what's appropriate. I was just asking her questions. I'm the innocent.
Which even that, like I wanted to speak about that, her insistence that she was just asking questions. If you go back and watch that scene, she wasn't asking any questions. She literally says, I got
accusations.
I forget how she says it. Like she uses language in this really weird way, I think, to confuse people. But she says, I got verbal confirmation that it was you. There was no question. And Lisa even says, are you asking me or are you accusing me? And then again, Whitney kind of sidesteps that. But this is an example of what I'm talking about, where she wasn't asking questions. She didn't sit down with Lisa and say, hey, I'm trying to put this together. This is the information I've got. Let me ask you about this. She did frame it as an accusation. And again, then Lisa has a reaction to that. And that's a whole other conversation about, how difficult it is for Lisa to just walk away. But Lisa has the reaction that Whitney's looking for. And then again, the attention goes on the reaction. And then within that, Whitney's suddenly revising history and saying, I was just asking innocent questions and look at how you're behaving. And because everything's moving so fast, and because Whitney's so good at just telling lies as if they're truth, everyone is just breezing past the part where Whitney wasn't just asking questions. That's not what she was doing. Just like, to the previous point, she didn't get, I mean, that's what's crazy about this. She did not get verbal confirmation. She literally got the opposite from Up and Adam. She got verbal confirmation that it wasn't Lisa. So this whole thing,
wow,
even like not like leaving aside parsing out the details of what she's lying about in terms of, I was just asking innocent questions. The whole fucking thing is based on a profound, deep lie, which then brings me back to this whole thing. This, Whitney, you are not being wrongfully persecuted. You literally
are wrongfully persecuting. Yeah.
Like Up and Adam, I think, even mentioned that he spoke to Meredith about this whole situation. Meredith, when this whole thing was breaking, Meredith said to him at first, she was like, part of me is having trouble believing that Whitney would actually do this because it is so incredibly stupid to be a public figure and to then resell Alibaba and think that you're not going to get caught, right? But it's like, again, she didn't even bother to take new photos. And even I did drop into that. I was like, why didn't she take new photos? And like, kind of what I was feeling was, well, that's time, that's money. Again, it's a scarcity thing. I don't want to invest any more than I have to. And also, I'm in a rush. I want to get this out there. I got to do this as fast as I can. No one's going to notice. It's just like rush, 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 rush. Scarcity, 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 scarcity. But you know, my main point in all of this was just, this is built on such foundational lies, but then she just creates a house of cards of smaller lies on top of the big lies that then generate the reaction. So we're too busy talking about Lisa's reaction and talking about John Barlow's reaction, and then we're too busy parsing out the smaller lies that we don't ever even get to the big lies. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to say, sorry, I'm sort of all over the place. The reason why I brought in that occult element too is like, you know, and when you talk about hypnosis, I don't know, there's something about that to me also just speaks to the way that production, either consciously or unconsciously, does seem to grease the wheels of her MLM lying way of life.
Love it. Yeah, you know, I'll just say to end with this too, based off of what you just said. Like, it seems like getting people to believe the lie is her kryptonite, maybe because she was raised in a lie and it's just part of her DNA. But that's exactly like when people are like, I can't believe Trump just said this and they're saying he didn't. It is a real thing out there. And people who lie, they like lying. They love it. They're addicted to getting away with a lie. And it could just be fed from like, if they were raised where they were raised in a lie and the power people, the people that had power got away with lying, then that's their higher power, is getting away with the lie.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I'll just end on this note. I want to take hope from the fact that we are having this conversation. I want to take hope from the fact that this did feel so much clearer to me than the world of Whitney has ever felt. I want to take hope from the fact that I was able to do drop-ins. And, you know, I really want to say, for the sake of Whitney's highest good, maybe this will be the reunion where she really gets confronted with the deeper truths. And I really want to send energetic support to the women to not get distracted by our smoke and mirrors, to not fall for the traps, to not get triggered, because truthfully, I have this feeling kind of like what's happening with Tamara, where so much of this stuff is blowing up in her face in such a big way. And it's forcing, well, she's not forced to do anything, but it's actually inspired her to go get therapy and to realize that she's looking at things in a binary black and white way. And there's things there to look at. I just feel like if we really could, or if someone could really part the curtain for Whitney in a way where it's undeniable, maybe that would be the impetus she needs to start being willing to pull the curtain back on herself. I mean, as I say that, it's so hard because she is married to Justin. And so it's like, if she starts...
And she's partnered with Heather and they've got this whole thing. So we'll see.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, this is a whole other topic. I know Heather is not having the best season, and I know there's stuff that she's doing that's annoying, but I actually feel Heather on a journey. And I think Heather is definitely further along than Whitney. For sure.
Yeah, me too. Oh, Heather is further along than Whitney. And I actually, I typically tend to, up until this conversation with her and Bronwyn, but typically I do think there is a real genuine part of Heather. I think Heather has a genuine identity. She has an identity. And Whitney, I think, struggles with having an identity. And that's, to me, a big difference.
But it's so funny. As someone who has been warming up to Heather more and more, there's two places where I still I start to get triggered. And one of them is just when she does the whole self-deprecating thing. I just want to shake her and sort of like, stop, Heather. This is self-deprecation is not a personality. This is not cute. This is not funny. Stop it.
Totally.
I am. Take some of Lisa's I am.
Yes.
But the other part is her relationship with Whitney. And I just feel like I think they're under some illusion.
They're not good for each other.
They're under some illusion that this whole kissing cousins thing is like cute. Like they think they're Laverne and Shirley. And I just want to reach through the screen and just like, Heather, this is not cute. This is not a good look.
No, she will throw you under the bus in a heartbeat. Like Whitney has never been a good friend or cousin to Heather, ever. Like, ever.
You only bring yourself down with this relationship. And I actually, I mean, again, this is a whole separate conversation, but I always feel like they hate each other.
They do. If you look at, like, I don't know who Whitney likes. Maybe she likes Justin and maybe she loves her kids, right? But other than that, like, I don't see her liking anybody. And that's a whole other thing. But yeah.
Well, yeah, we haven't even, because I also feel like there's a lot of mom stuff with Lisa and Whitney as well. So, I mean, look, there's so much we could get into. I know you have to go. Molly, I cannot stress enough how much I value what you bring to the podcast. And you just help me go to even deeper levels. And I just want to thank you. Tell people where they should look for you and find you.
Yes, well, I have a new single that I've produced. It's a song. It's a minor key version of Bad Moon Rising by CCR. It's going to be really, really cool. And then my band, Lyra and the Light, we are releasing our 3-year in the works album on 12/12, hopefully. But yeah, that's where you can find me, Molly Durand Music. You can find me online, listen to my music, or at Molly Durand on Instagram. And also, Jamie, it's an honor to be here with you. Every time I have these conversations, I learn more about myself and my own psyche and my own healing. So, healing.
And if you cool with this, I'm more than happy to play your single at the end of this. If you
Great. Yeah.
So guys, yes, stick around once this is over and we'll debut Molly's single. That'll be fun. And as always, you can find me on Instagram, Jamie Stein, JAMIESTEIN, where I have tons of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. And as always, if you are interested in learning more about your intended lessons in this lifetime and how perhaps some of your behaviors that maybe don't serve you are actually here to help you, and how to work with your own patterns in a way where you can step into your higher self rather than your limiting unconscious patterns, then send me an email through my website. I will have a link in the show notes, or you can head over to hollywoodreadings.com. All right, you guys, we did it once again. Thanks for being with me as always. Hope you are having a meaningful start to your winter, and I will see you on the flip side. Bye.
I see a bad moon rising. I see trouble on the way. I see earthquakes and light.